Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center and our pre-flight press briefings for Atlantis' voyage to the International Space Station, STS-132 International Space Station Assembly Flight ULF-4. Joining us for the first briefing is for the program overview is John Shannon and Mike Suffredini. John Shannon is the program manager for the Space Shuttle program, and Mike Suffredini is the program manager for the International Space Station program. We'll hear from both, and then we'll take questions here and at the other NASA centers. With that, I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. We're doing very well in our preparations for the May 14th launch, a week from this Friday. If you remember, we had a little bit of difficulty getting Atlantis out to the pad due to weather and some other issues. And the team at Kennedy Space Center did a really nice job of protecting the hardware and making sure that we got out there safely. But what happened is it reduced our contingency time down to about 1 day. The team has been doing a great job of processing the vehicle. We've had no issues that have taken up that contingency day, but we're watching that. But so far, things are looking really good. There's some additional work that's been going on since we just landed 13 days ago, and it's been a real quick turnaround. The fact that Discovery's mission 2 weeks ago really went so well and we had so few issues has really enabled us to be able to look at all of the flight performance and make sure that Atlantis is ready to go as well. We got the KU band antenna electronics out of Discovery and took it to our depot where we do repairs over the weekend, and determined that the issue was a faulty transistor inside the exciter circuit. So basically, the antenna could not radiate. We've done all the checks on Atlantis' KU band antenna, and we do not believe that we have any type of a similar problem. That transistor is the same type of transistor that failed back on STS-132, I believe, the last time we lost a KU band antenna. We also had a loss of a small ceramic plug that goes over the top of the fasteners around the windows and the side hatch and the payload bay door hinge line. Any areas where we want to take tiles or carrier panels off, we'll have a fastener, but over that fastener for thermal protection, we'll put a little ceramic plug. We had changed out a number of those plugs prior to Discovery's mission so that we could make sure that we were not putting too much pressure on them so they'd come out. We actually lost one, and we think it's because the retaining feature that we had was not sufficient. So we're being proactive in going in to Atlantis' ceramic plugs and replacing all of them around the windows, all of them around the side hatch. And I'm just really proud of the team. There was probably a case to be made where we did not have to go do that work. But even though it's the last planned flight of Atlantis, the team is continuing to do all the things that we can to make sure the vehicle is in as good a shape as possible. Other news in the program, ET-137, which is our next to last external tank for the program that we expect to fly. It's on the barge Pegasus out at Michoud Assembly Facility. The Freedom Star, which is our solid rocket booster recovery ship that would go get that barge with the ET on it and bring it around to Kennedy Space Center, it's kind of stuck in Gulfport, Mississippi right now. Because of the oil slick, they'd have to take a little different path with the barge, and the Freedom Star cannot do that shallow water course to Michoud. So the external tank team has done a really nice job of getting some commercial tugs to be able to take Pegasus over to Gulfport, where it will hook up with the Freedom Star, and then Freedom Star will bring it around to Kennedy Space Center. We're going to start that journey tonight at about 7 o'clock, and that will allow Freedom Star to start the move around to Kennedy Space Center during the daylight so they can look for any oil slicks. Additionally, the team has kind of gone above and beyond. They've looked at any impacts of any oil off-gassing from seawater on external tank foam or any of the systems on the barge or on Freedom Star, and all those studies are complete, and it all looks really good. So, even though we dealt with weather for the rollout, the team worked around it extremely well. Even though we have a small turnaround between these two flights, The team has done all of the work they needed to do to assess any anomalies and has done well. And even though we have this unexpected oil spill out in the Gulf, the team is just working around that. So it's a very robust, very intelligent team that is doing what is required to keep the program on track. We're going to meet this Friday to do one of our final budget reviews for the middle of the year here, and we track our human capital. And all of the indications are that the human capital for the shuttle program execution is going very well. We track our critical skills very closely, and that all looks really good. So we don't see any issues with finishing out the program this year. And that's all I had today. Mike.
Well, good morning. We're leading up to our third to our last shuttle flight to ISS. All of these flights bring us a number of critical components because of the upload capability of the ISS. We do quite a bit of things on each one of these flights, as you've all become accustomed to. This particular flight is no different. We're installing an extension to the FGB nadir port, referred to as the Mini Research Module 2, or MRM2. You'll hear us talk about it. It is not only is it act as an extension, so we can clear an interference between with the Node 1 nadir port when we put the new permanent stowage module, the PMM, on there. But also it's carrying about 1.4 metric tons of cargo inside. We won't get to that till after the shuttle leaves, but that is critical logistics for us as well. And of course, in addition to that, for this flight, we're changing out the batteries. The other set of batteries on the P6 module, we have quite a bit of experience with that from the last flight. We learned a lot. We've included those lessons learned into this particular mission, and have a high degree of confidence that the battery changeout will go according to plan. In addition to that, we have the backup KU band system. It's something we actually added to the program a couple years ago. It's flying up, and we'll install that on the Z1 truss. It's a cold backup capability until we get our new avionics system on board in about the 2011 timeframe, and at that point it'll be kind of a warm backup. If the other KU band has a problem, we can quickly switch to this backup system. In addition to that, we're flying up a small device that will attach to the Dexter arms and hold ORUs for us when they're doing changeouts. We call it the EOTP. All of these components are installed in the payload bay. All the checkouts are complete. We completed our SORR, which is a station version of a pre-FRR, and everything is ready to go. On orbit, as we prepare for the launch, we have a few things left to do. It seems like it's always the case. We're very busy traffic-wise on ISS because we need to clear the port that this new module is going to go to on the FGB nadir. We have to move the 21 Soyuz. In order to move the 21 Soyuz, we have to have a port clear to put it in. And that port's going to be where the 36P Progress sits today, which is the SM aft port. So on May 10th, the plan is to go ahead and undock the 36 Progress and send it home. And then on the 12th, we'll relocate 21 Soyuz from FGB nadir, put it to the SM aft, and that'll clear the way for the MRM2 to be installed there. So those activities are planned. Over the weekend, as you witnessed, we had the docking of the 37 Progress. About a kilometer out, one of the thrusters on the Progress had a problem. The automated system lost track with the station, and so the crew was asked to take manual control of the Progress, which they did, and Oleg flew it in and docked it safely to the ISS. He did a magnificent job, and according to our Russian counterparts, that's the furthest away a crew has flown a Progress to dock to the ISS. So our hats off to the crew and our Russian colleagues for performing that activity. But of course, the thruster question is an issue being worked by our Russian colleagues. In addition to that particular thruster issue, we had installed the new service module thrusters, software to the new service module computers, and after we installed, it's referred to as SM 8.04, the 36 progress thrusters at the time went offline. They have subsequently been regained, but our Russian colleagues are trying to understand, is there any relationship between this new software, the 36P anomaly, and the 37P anomalies? And they've formed a commission to go sort this out and try to understand the implications. In the meantime, we'll use the service module thrusters for control of the vehicle until they complete their analysis and get back with us on that. Right now, the station's in good shape. In fact, we had a little bit of, I was mentioning one of you today, we had a little bit of luck, which we also take in the program whenever it's given to us. We were able to finally free up a regulator that is in the nitrogen tank assembly that would not open back up for us during the last mission. We did manage to finally free it up after making it very cold, and then commanding it. It did react. We put it in a position, a fixed position, and powered it down, and so we have pressure to the system. The ammonia tank is now integrated into the cooling system, and we're good to go for the long term. The team is off assessing whether or not we can live with the nitrogen tank in a fixed position for the life of the tank. Early indications are that we will be able to do that, and that would be great news. That tank's relatively new. We really would hate to have had to bring it home, or at least take it out and replace it with the spare this early in its life. So that was good news for us. In addition to that, we reconfigured the space station to put the fourth crew quarter in place in Node 2. In order to do that, unfortunately, we had to move the T2, and before we did that, we wanted to make sure that the yearly maintenance on the TVIS was done. And so over the last couple of weeks, the team has worked very hard, and the crew too, because they did it partly on their days off over the weekends. We did the maintenance on the TVIS, which was quite a bit of work for the crew. They got it back together and operating, and at that point then, not this last weekend, but the weekend before, we went ahead and moved T2. Once we got T2 into the pit, it's not really a pit, we don't refer to that part as a pit, it's a rack location. In Node 3, we thought it looked like we didn't have enough sway space. So at that point, we took some measurements and sent those down to the ground while the team installed the crew quarter into Node 2. They completed the crew quarter install, and meanwhile, the ground team took a look at the data. It has since been determined that we do have the adequate sway space inside the location where the T2 is at. Because we're focusing on some research work this week, by early next week, we'll complete the about 3 hours worth of work we have yet to go to complete the install and do the checkout of T2. So we don't expect to have it up and running until early next week. If we had a need for it, we could certainly finish that work in the near term, but because this stage has been so short, we're trying to make time for research. The final thing I'll mention to you is we just flew 19A, as you're all well aware, and that MPLM did very well for us on orbit. And in fact, that MPLM is in the process of being modified to be the permanent module, and it's on track to have all that work done and be ready to fly in the September time slot that we're currently scheduled for ULF-5. And that completes my status.
Thanks, gentlemen. We'll take questions here and then at the other NASA centers. We have about 30 minutes or 35 minutes for questions. So let's start over here with Mark.
Thank you, Mark Carreau for Aviation Week. It's a space station question. Could you sort of update us on the water recovery system, what's working and not, or if it's all working, and sort of take a look at the missions you have left, if there's more troubleshooting to do, and sort of discuss what options you have or what you hope will happen?
Wow, Mark, that's a That's a big question. Let me start with the water processing system, including the urine processor, is a relatively new system to ISS, and so and it's also a new process for us to implement on orbit as an agency, as a team, and so we would expect to continue to learn how these things operate, not only in orbit, but in the conditions that you simulate on the ground and then find out what real life is about on orbit. So the first part of the answer is everything's working today on orbit, both the urine processor and the water processor. We had a little hiccup on the urine processor over the weekend that we've since recovered from. And we're trying to understand that anomaly, but we're still processing as necessary. I'm not sure actually if the UPA is back up right this instant, but we can use it when we get the levels in the tank that are necessary to begin processing the next batch. We have returned, so let's do this a piece at a time. We'll start with the water processor. We had the leak of the catalytic bed. We have returned that bed. We have begun our failure analysis. We have done some teardown. And we don't have conclusive evidence yet, but it's starting to point to perhaps the seal wasn't quite correct for the application, but we'll more to come on that. We did take piece parts up along with the other cat bed, the spare cat bed that we flew, so that in the event that we needed to change seals or something, we could do that on orbit if it came to that. So far, everything seems to be working well with that system. In addition to that, we've been struggling a little bit with microbes really in the water line, from the waste tank into the processor itself. As you recall, we changed out the MLS, which we had a pump. It also has a vent for free gas to get back into the cabin. We changed out that whole system. We put a filter in place. There was still some indications of minor restrictions, not enough to prevent it from operating, but over time that's gotten better and better. So we're thinking we're clearing that out. But we need a long-term plan, which we're working on, to deal with microbes in this waste tank. And it might be as simple as just changing out the filter regularly. But we're just not certain yet. We do have a process in place now where we've changed a little bit. At the end of each process, the simple way to say it is we take the processed water and flow it back through the whole loop again, all the way back to almost to the waste tank and then through the system. And what that's doing is bringing iodinated water now back into that line and helping killing some of the microbes in the water processor. So that is one step we've already taken. In addition to that, there's a valve very similar to the one that we changed out when we changed the MLS that's just downstream of the waste tank. We have determined that we can remove that valve basically and just leave an open port there, and that is the step we'll take if that valve becomes stopped up due to microbes. So far that has not been an issue, but it's a very similar valve with very small clearances, so it's not unlikely that that might eventually cause us a problem. And then, of course, we have the filter in place, which we can change out regularly. So we're working through the cat bed issue. We're looking at long-term plans to control the microbial growth in the water processor, and I think we're starting to get our arms around that. On the UPA, the biggest challenge that we're working with there is the calcium concentrations. We found that the DA that we brought home the second time had quite a bit of calcium deposits inside. And this has been the challenge for the team for some time. We operated the last several tanks at 65% recovery in order to ensure that we kept the concentrations down so we wouldn't begin to precipitate calcium into the DA. We're now trying to work our way back up to a slightly higher concentrations in order to help our logistics. We're doing some final analysis on water balance and make sure we can stay on the positive side when we need to while looking at mitigation steps, but we're trying to get ourselves to 70% in the RFTA. And then meanwhile, the team is off trying to understand, is there anything we can do to keep the calcium down? And this is also related, we believe, to the pH levels that we had that the team is also dealing with. So we're knee-deep in chemistry with the UPA. And that has to do with using the actual flush water that we use on orbit with actual crew usage. Some of that was simulated on the ground, and also the bodies of long-duration astronauts tend to deposit different minerals into their deposits, if you will, and on orbit than what happens on the ground, and that's showing us that it's making a significant impact into the operation. So that one's still in front of us. We think we can manage the risk by keeping the concentration down in the RFTA, and that's an impact to RFTAs, processing of RFTAs and getting them back to orbit, but we think we can manage our way through that.
Bill Harwood, CBS, with a couple for John and one for Mike. Looking ahead, I'd heard some talk a little bit back about the PMM and having a little, not sure you can make the 16th. Is the 16th doable under the current schedule, the way it's laid out right now?
That's your question.
The PMM will make, yes. We have a couple of major ORUs that we'd like to fly that are very tight. So if we got the opportunity to let that flight slip a little bit, we would put those ORUs inside and fly them. So we have talked about that and kicking around different options. We've talked about that. If we can't slip, then we'll fly what we have and fly those ORUs later. But the PMM will make the 16th.
Thanks. And on 134, looking at when the beta cutout ends and when you go into the end of your rollover thing, I know you don't have a date, but I mean, if I assume somewhere around the 26th of November, would that be accurate, number one? And number two, is there any talk still going on about launching 135? Where does that stand? And if it's been ruled out completely, then I'll ignore my next question. But if it hasn't been ruled out completely for Suffredini, what would you put on there if you got that flight?
You want to take any part of this?
How about that? As far as AMS is concerned, Bill, we targeted no earlier than November, but we're going to let them get a little further along in the permanent magnet change out to see when we really believe they'll deliver to the Cape. Right now they're looking at August. If they make August, then November is a reasonable time frame for us to go fly that flight. But we're going to hold off on really setting a firm date until after AMS gets a little bit further along. As far as STS-135 or the launch on need mission, we're preparing it just like we would prepare for any regular flight. If we have to go fly it, the vehicle will be all configured and ready to go. But we're not currently working on any plans to fly it as a flight, except for a rescue vehicle.
But if you did?
If we did, so I was keen for the day, and you said, Mike, you could have this extra flight. You have it anywhere you want to. I'd ask for it in about the summertime of next year. I have quite a bit of logistics, flights, and capabilities between now and next spring-ish time frame. Given where we have to deliver cargo in order to fly on ATVs and HTVs and progresses and shuttles, if somebody said, hey, you can have this extra flight, I'd tell them, well, okay, but don't give it to me till next summer, because that's when I can make use of it.
Robert.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. A couple of questions for John. Sort of working off that last answer about launch on need, does Atlantis remain the launch on need vehicle for 134 given the delay to launching Endeavour? And is there a point where that would change on the schedule where Discovery would take over as the launch on need?
Yeah, right now, Atlantis is the launch on need vehicle for 134. That's the way our processing flow is set up. We always look at the overall manifest to try and optimize and give ourselves, enough time to process the vehicle between missions. Atlantis would have plenty of time right now. We'll reconsider it if things change, but right now that's the plan. Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah. Jim Oberg with NBC. Good morning. Saying that they have a possible, yes, you're looking at a software issue with controlling progress thrusters. For attitude control using service module thrusters, would that be the same case for a debris avoidance maneuver?
In fact, we just, first of all, thank you, Jim. Jim's reminding me with his cheat sheet here that I've been saying MRM-2. The vehicle flying in the payload bay is MRM-1. MRM-2 is on the zenith port of the service module. And ever since the Russians gave them MRM-1 and 2, I've always kind of struggled to remember which one's which. And I have a little way to do that, but it wasn't working for me this morning. Let's see. We, in fact, worked through a debris avoidance maneuver possibility Friday, and this very issue came up. There were two options. One was to look at using the service module thrusters. The other was to, there was actually 3 or 4 options discussed, but the other was to actually send up a radiogram directly to the Progress to let the Progress do the burn. At that time, we thought this was related to the SM-04 software, and it may still be related to that. And of course, the third was to decide just to let the crew reside in the Soyuz through the event. But the team was off working the plan to either do the maneuver with the commanding it through the service module using 36 Progress, or sending a radiogram up directly to the Progress from the ground control to do the burn with 36P. And one of the things our Russian colleagues are looking at right now is if we asked them to do another one today, given what happened with 37 Progress, would you still have the same set of options, or should we be thinking about something else? And so that's forward work for the team to go sort through.
It's not boring yet.
No, okay. not remotely. Again, I think, and I've only talked to a couple of the working level troops on this so far, but I think what happened with 37 Progress docking now, they're beginning to believe there's some relation to maybe it's in the Progress itself. Both 37P and 36P are the first Progresses without this matching unit that we used to do. They have a version of the SAVE-AM computer on board. And there's I guess some speculation that maybe there's something related between the two because of this new software. But
same on the first digital Soyuz. Well, we'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
Okay, my question then would, second question in terms of long-term management. You've got a coin-operated Sabatier reactor on board now, right? It's commercially owned, and you pay for it per hour. What's your plan to make use of that resource, and how is it going to ease your logistics issue?
Yes, Sabatier is on orbit. We were finishing up our effort to make sure Sabatier was, that we had done the work necessary to ensure it was safe, and recently I asked the NESC to take one more look for us, and that's because the way the Sabatier is plumbed into the system once it's installed is it sort of tells us when it's working and not working, which is kind of important for the oxygen generator to know which way to send the hydrogen as it's venting overboard. And so before we install it and activate it, we asked to take one more look. We sort of step back, as you said. It's one of these commercial, I'll call it sort of first step in the commercial world, where our friends at Hamilton Sundstrand built it and flew it, and we agreed to pay a certain amount, and we'd get water from it. And like you said, we'd sort of pay as we go. And so once NESC is complete with that, we've now completed our integrated hazard, which was our last step that we had to do internally. So once NESC is finished with their review, then we'll begin the process of installing it and activating it. And it will provide more water than we get today. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we would expect to get more water as it processes the CO2 from the Cedra and the hydrogen from the OGA, and turns that into to water and methane. It's very cool. Yeah.
Good morning, Eric Berger with the Houston Chronicle. One for John and one for Mike. First of all, John, following up on Bill's question about 4 flights possibly instead of 3. Again, they're still talking Congress about maybe trying to stretch the shuttle flight through 2012 by extending the current manifest and adding 1. And I guess previously I know you've talked about the fixed costs of the shuttle program and that those don't go down much if you reduce the flight. I'm just wondering, in terms of funding, how much it would actually cost to fly 4 shuttle missions over the next 2 years as opposed to 3 shuttle missions between now and November.
Okay. at our current rate, where we're not doing a lot of production, but we're doing a lot of operations, we can get the overall cost of the program down to about $1.8 billion per year, and that's at a two flights per year kind of rate. As far as any short-term extension, we're good from our budget standpoint to the end of this year. We also will probably have we've been trying to save money wherever we can in case we had some kind of issue where we had to slip out past the new year. So we could probably, without asking for any additional money, go out through February-ish timeframe. But anything beyond that, we would need additional money, and depending on the number of flights, or if we wanted to get back in production, or if we just wanted to stretch out what we had, it could be anywhere from the $1.8 billion a year just for operations up to around the $2.8 billion if we're going to actually get back into any kind of a production cadence at all.
And then from Mike, from an operational standpoint, would having Orion solely as a lifeboat on the station be of a functional utility to you, or are you sort of satisfied with the Soyuz capabilities that you have?
Okay, they're not really related, but I'll talk to that. First of all, I'm absolutely satisfied with the capabilities of the Soyuz. I think the idea behind the Orion was it could be the rescue function for when if we were able to get commercial crew capability and the commercial crew vehicles could not reside on orbit for a long period of time. And in that case, of course, you'd have a lifeboat in conjunction with crewed vehicles coming and going. And that scenario certainly works for us. And some version of Orion would certainly do what the Soyuz did for us today, assuming it landed on land, which is my understanding was being considered for the rescue boat capability. But that's that's brand new introduction for us, and we're not very far in assessing it and talking to our constellation friends about that. So that's really forward work for us to sort that out.
Mark.
Mark Kirkman, Interspace News. This is a two-part question for John. With the shuttle program winding down, I was wondering if you can take me through the process of dispositioning all the shuttle program assets in terms of, any institution, individual, whoever wants it, how do they go about requesting it, and how and who within the program decides when and how that'll be done. And with that in mind, I guess word on the street is that the Aggies are going to get a hold of the SMS. I was wondering how that came about, and when they say they're getting the SMS, do they retain ownership of it once they get it, or are they just going to operate it and it's still owned by somebody else?
Okay, it's a little bit far afield from what I do on a day-to-day because I don't do a lot of the transition and retirement activities since we're still in the operational phase of the program, but we can get you those answers. From a dispositioning the shuttle program assets, there is a team that is comprised of headquarters and shuttle program and legal and procurement and everything else. They go through and identify shuttle program assets that could be let go. My part of that whole process is to go and look through that, make sure that there is nothing on there that we think we will use in the near term. If there is, we take it off the list immediately. And they're still working through the process of how museums, schools, other nonprofit kind of agencies could use that kind of hardware and the process for how they get it. As far as specific organizations getting any hardware, I don't know, and the team up at headquarters will work through that. So we can let them talk to you if you have specific questions.
So you don't know about the SMSs?
No, I have no idea. We're still using it, by the way, so they can't have it yet. Yeah.
Stephen Clark with Spaceflight Now. A question for Mike Suffredini. Based on the current projections of what you think you're going to need in terms of supplies and science on space station, when do you think you're going to need a operational commercial cargo capability for space station?
We like the current plan we have, which has them coming next year to ISS, and that plan works. We have done a number of assessments to try to understand our flexibility if they slip to some degree, and we can stand a certain amount of movement to the right, the kind of movement you'd expect in new programs as they try to get started and get off the ground. So I'd say we have a certain amount of flexibility, maybe give or take maybe a year's worth of slip from their original dates that I think we could stand, and then after that we'd have to start thinking of creative ways. I will tell you that one of the things we've tried to protect for is a certain level of maintenance on board ISS, and in spite of the challenges with the water processors, actually maintenance on board ISS has been much lower than we had estimated. So there's a little bit of margin in our maintenance numbers, which if we continue to be blessed, will provide us a little additional margin as well.
Okay, let's go to the Kennedy Space Center for a few questions there, please.
Yes, Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press. This is Atlantis' last flight, and I'm wondering if you could just talk about that for a few minutes, each of you, and whether that adds a sense of melancholy to all of this or really makes it sink in that the end is really near.
Well, okay, I can start out, Marcia. It's the last planned flight of Atlantis. Of course, we're going to continue to process it after the STS-132 mission is the launch on need vehicle for STS-134 now. And I have not spent a lot of time thinking about, last this or last that. Since we landed 13 days ago and we launch in 11 days, it's been a great turnaround, a great cadence. The team has never been working better than they are right now, and it's just been a great thing to be a part of. So I think maybe after we get all done, then we'll release the big breath and then maybe think about what it all meant to us, but not while we're in the middle of actually processing and flying these vehicles. Mike, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think of it similarly. I'm expecting Atlantis to fly this mission and do what she's always done, and then it'll land and be ready for the next thing we ask it to do. And I really haven't thought about it much as being the last one coming to station either. I'm sure at some point I'll give it a lot of thought, but maybe a little bit later on.
And for Mike Suffredini, if you were king and you got your wish of having a shuttle mission next summer, what would you put on it? You mentioned you'd have a lot of ORUs and things, but what specifically do you see the need as being?
Well, okay, so the first assumption I make is perhaps some of our commercial cargo guys aren't quite flying as regularly as we hoped. And so there would be normal logistics. These recycle filter tank assemblies, the RFTAs that the UPA uses, as long as we can bring them home, we can refurbish them and refly them. And we've limited the number we've built because we're off building an advanced version of the tank that can be offloaded on orbit. So the first thing I would do is fly as many of those as I could to orbit and bring home all the ones that were on orbit in an MPLM. So we would fly an MPLM. We would fly some other ORUs we have coming, perhaps, depending on what's happening with the logistics vehicles. I hope to fill it up with research, and I'd probably put an LMC in there as well in case I had an external ORU that had a problem. I could perhaps bring up its replacement. Now, with that said, I have replacements on orbit, but what I would do basically is replace the spare. I would take the failed one home and replace it with a new spare. But it would be nice to be able to do all that in a single mission.
Hi, it's Irene Klotz with Reuters. Mike, are you involved in drawing up the criteria for what Orion Light's capabilities will be?
Yes, we're responsible for the requirements for the rescue vehicle. Absolutely.
So can you describe a little bit what you're looking for that capsule to do?
Well, in general, we ask rescue vehicles to be able to bring the crew home to a location that can be relatively quickly gotten to by search and rescue and medical personnel. We expect it to always be on orbit. We expect it to be able to have a short period of time as a place the crew can habitate in event of emergency but not leave. So, you know, several hours where they can just close the hatch and wait for things to settle down on orbit, where we can talk about what we're doing and see if there's something we want to do to go back in and recover the vehicle, or whether we really want to leave. So we've heard that as a safe haven function, and so we would expect that. We'd also expect it to have any orbit entry capability. And while that's not something that you want to have to do, and we would try really hard to wait until we were at orbit that was gave us the best chance of getting to the crew as quickly as possible, we would like to have any orbit, any deorbit capability. If it's able, we would like it to be able to provide for the capability to continue to keep an IV, to keep a respirator going, those sorts of things. We can't do that in the Soyuz today. It's something we hope to do in our rescue vehicles in the future.
Thanks. And for John, you mentioned that you've got budget to go through February 2011, if needed. Does that include this $600 million, which I don't think has been appropriated yet? And what would happen if the NASA fiscal 2010 budget is not in place by October 1st with the shuttle people on existing contracts that technically would be getting their layoff notices effective that date?
It does include the supplemental $600 million to fly through the end of December. We've received assurances from the administration that that money will be coming if it's excuse me, if it's required. I think that the rationale behind that is very sound, and that everyone agrees with, that we take the pressure off of the program to make sure that we get everything done by September. And having that money allows us to not worry about schedule very much, and the team is not, as far as I can tell. If that did not show up, then we would be out of funds shortly after the fiscal year. Maybe we could go with the amount of money we're trying to save this year. We could probably go another month, 6 weeks, 2 months, something like that. And whether that would encompass all of the missions or not just depends on how the processing goes. So we do include that $600 million in the equation.
And as far as the shuttle, the contracts, people would still. There's no mechanism in place that people are automatically laid off at the end of the fiscal year.
No, it's we have concentrated a tremendous amount on the contracts and our workforce profile, and we have been following that workforce profile very closely. As a matter of fact, this week we'll be laying off about 800 employees across the entire program, mostly in production areas, but also in some of our logistics areas and launch and landing. That was all expected. There is nothing that we've deviated from. If we extended the program, we have a mechanism in place to be able to do 1-month contract extensions. We've worked that with all of our contractor partners and understand exactly how to go do that. Once we finish flying, it's pretty clear exactly what the workforce profile looks like. The operations team, which has been kept very high while we go through this flight rate, will be let go on the contractor side, and that's very well understood by the team.
Hi, this is James Dean from Florida Today. Just quickly following up Ms. Shannon on Irene's question. How many, if any, of those 800 do you know are based here in Florida? And again, you were just talking about this, but I was just curious how the revised manifest is likely to change, if at all, the the schedule of layoffs for the workforce, especially here at KSC?
It's about 300, and all of them, excuse me, all of them that I believe we're going to be able to do with voluntary retirements. So it will not be any forced layoffs that we could see. Although that's, the numbers change on a daily basis. What I would suspect is that if we extended the program, it would not change our workforce profile very much. It might, excuse me. It might allow us to reduce the workforce even more because you're spreading the work out over a longer period of time, but you would keep that core group around for the extended period while you're still flying. So, the benefit of extending is that you can keep that core group around for a while. Whereas if you finished earlier on, you would let that whole team go.
Thanks. And following up, I think, Bill's question early on there, could you explain what the opportunities for launching Endeavour are in November and December with the cutout, the beta cutout, and the traffic of various different vehicles going up and down to the station?
Yeah, it gets pretty thin towards the end of the year as far as launch opportunities are concerned. Bill had it right that November 26 would be probably the only window that we would really want to go for because of a beta cutout and the year-end rollover. We're just going to stand by, and AMS has the alpha magnetic spectrometer has a lot of work ahead of them to replace the cryo-cooled magnet with the permanent magnet. I think they'll be through most of that activity as we get into the summer months. By that time, we'll have flown STS-132, and we'll have the PMM cargo discussion will be more clear. So we're going to hold off on really setting a date for AMS until they get a little further along and we understand where we are in our manifest. And I would suspect by early summertime we'll have a good date for that flight.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to overdo it here, but I know you're not setting a date, but when you say November 26 window, is that a few days, or is there two or 3 weeks there that you have?
I'll have to get it to you because it's fairly complicated. We can give you exactly what little slivers of window we have through the end of November, and we actually have a real small sliver in early December, so we'll get that to you.
Okay, final questions from NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Tarek Malik from Space.com and Space News, and I think I have just a couple of questions to follow up with John. John, you're coming up on, I guess, a few months lull after what would be almost 3 missions in as many months, and I'm just wondering how you're keeping the team focused, knowing that you'd have maybe a pretty light summer with just two flights left sometime in the fall.
Yeah, the team has been staying very focused. We'll use it to do some training, some maintenance. We'll continue to work any issues on the vehicle. Part of the thing that amazes me about this team is they do not treat any of these flows like last flows. They continue to investigate. They continue to improve the vehicles. I expect that our tempo, even though we're not flying for really from May to September, I don't expect that the tempo will decrease much, and that the team will continue to keep doing all the things that they've been doing to make sure the vehicles are as safe as possible. And of course, our training template will be the same. The mission in September and then the follow-on AMS mission are very challenging missions, and it'll be nice to have a little bit of time to prepare and train and really get set for those. So I don't expect a big downturn in activity over the summer and early fall.
Thank you. And my last question refers to the ET delivery that you mentioned earlier. I'm just wondering how the oil slick kind of contingency work you did has either slowed that process or how different it is from, say, a normal tank delivery, and if you have to check it out when it arrives at the Cape as well. Thank you.
Okay. The ET-137 is currently on the Pegasus barge. They're always towed from the dock at Michoud Assembly Facility around to Kennedy Space Center by the solid rocket booster recovery ship. And because of the oil spill, that path they would normally take, which is a deep water path for the SRB recovery ship, is not available. And so there's a little more shallow draft path, and we're going to use commercial tugs to take Pegasus over to Gulfport, where Freedom Star is waiting for it. The team did a nice job in assessing would there be any, if you went through an oil slick patch, would that cause any problems to Freedom Star or Pegasus or the external tank, and that work was done really from just an off-guessing standpoint. You may end up having to clean the barge and the ship a little bit more, but that's okay. And every time, every ET, regardless of what the trip or any issues during the transport, every time it is unloaded, we take it into the vertical assembly building at Kennedy Space Center, into the checkout cell, and run a systems check on it and look at it very closely and make sure that it didn't have any issues during the transport. And the team is very good at doing that. And that's before it would go into the integration cell to be mated up to the solid rocket boosters. You know, things are we're just continuing to process, continuing to do things. For the STS-133 flight currently in September, Mobile Launch Platform number 3 is in High Bay 3. We're starting stacking on it this week. We're getting the ET out there. It's just a lot of fun to watch the folks at the Cape do the job that they do so extremely well, and get ready for the next flight. And so it's, you know, the team, they know what to do, and they go through the processes. And even though you have weather issues or oil slicks or who knows what, you know, coming up, they're able to do the appropriate analyses and make sure that we're going to be good to go on the dates that we set.
Okay, that's all the time we have for this briefing. The next briefing up is the mission overview with the 2 flight directors. They also have a special guest that's going to join that panel. That'll be a surprise for you. And so look for that at the top of the hour here, and we'll be back with that briefing. Thank you, gentlemen.